It's Friday, April 4th. Let's talk PlayStation. Let's kick off today's episode with me telling you that PlayStation Now, more invites are being sent out to the private beta. Sony is letting more people on, probably doing some stress tests and, gradually working their way up to the public beta. And then an actual release come summer for America, and we still have no word on Europe. So definitely check your emails, check your spam folder, check your junk folder, just in case. Some invites went out earlier this week, some went out yesterday, I believe, and some are even more going out. So be aware, otherwise you might miss out on the invite. Moving on, Sony has confirmed that more than 1,000 developers are licensed to self-publish on PlayStation 4, which is incredible. Now, 1,000 developers. If each developer made a game, that's 1,000 games right there. That's a lot. Of course, that doesn't guarantee 1,000 games, but that really shows Sony's initiative with independent developers to get games on the platform. Again, whether you have a problem with indie games or not, games are games, and indie games does not mean less AAA games, it means more games, period. To put that number into perspective, Microsoft recently revealed that they have 250 developers licensed to self-publish, so that's a very big number, and it's awesome that, again, Sony is taking this initiative to bring people onto the platform and say, here's some dev kits, let's get you going, and let's get some games on our platform. So a while ago we talked about a PlayStation 4 and PlayStation Vita bundle for the UK. Well, Amazon UK right now has a listing for a PS4 and Vita bundle for £499. Now you cannot order it just yet. In fact, there is no date listed on it as far as I know. But we actually heard about this a long time ago. Originally, we were supposed to apparently get a PS4 and Vita bundle around PS4's launch, like around December, a little bit after, and that actually, that of course never came. But we don't know if this is a hard bundle by Sony or if this is a soft bundle from Amazon, the retailer, just bundling the two together to offer you a compelling price. But more or less, it's a thing, and it will probably come now. So let's talk about some Project Morpheus, because we're going to be talking about this thing a lot for the next coming years on this show, until it actually finally launches, and then we start seeing videos on it. But Sony Online Entertainment talked about how they were hugely interested in, working with Project Morpheus, and how they would more than likely probably support it for EverQuest Next on PS4. I think what's interesting about this, at least, is to kind of show you how each division and subdivision of Sony, how independently they run from one another, and how sometimes they just really don't coordinate with each other. The EverQuest development director David Jorgensen talked about how Morpheus is of course only for PlayStation 4, so if they're only making PC products, then they're not going to use Morpheus, and they would actually opt to use Oculus Rift, which this is Sony Online Entertainment. This is Sony, and it's like he's directly saying, like, if we make PC products, so we're going to use Oculus. We wouldn't work with Sony Computer Entertainment in that regard. But if EverQuest Next does come to PlayStation 4, which it is, they would more than likely want to try and use it. But of course, there is like the conflict of Sony Computer Entertainment saying like Morpheus is only for PS4, so we wouldn't allow it to use for PC. But it's just to show you how they sort of operate independently. They're not at all talking to each other or kind of making that work. It's like if SOE wants to, use Morpheus, they got to use the PS4 version, and we're not going to let you use Morpheus on the PC for EverQuest on PC. It's just like, kind of shows how they, they just sometimes don't want anything to do with one another. But moving away from EverQuest, the video game coming out in 2015, Get Even, that is the name of the game, the developers of that game are saying that they will support Morpheus, and they will also, of course, support Oculus Rift for their PC version. Which, and correct me if I'm wrong, but this is more or less the first video game that is publicly saying, like, this is it. Like, this will be a game that will support Project Morpheus. Which I think is fair to say for them, at least, because this game's not going to be ready till at least 2015, and that's a TBA, like, to be announced in 2015. The game is, of course, a long ways off, as is Morpheus, but more or less, that's like one title saying, yeah, it's gonna support Morpheus, which we need to see some of that, right? You're not going to want to buy Project Morpheus if you don't have games to buy for it. So we want to see some software to support it, and here's one of them. So if you're a fan of Soul Sacrifice, you'll be happy to know that Soul Sacrifice Delta was rated by the Australian ratings board for PAL territories, which would mean that the game is more or less going to come to the West. It was originally only for Japan, and now it's coming over, which is cool. I like Soul Sacrifice a lot, so I really hope it comes to America so I can play it. Soul Sacrifice Delta, of course, is not a Soul Sacrifice sequel, but more so Soul Sacrifice 1.5 with just extra Arc Fiends, items, and offerings and all that. But, you know, of course, we want to play it. We want Vita games. Why not? And Keiji Inafune is still saying basically that he wants to do a sequel for Soul Sacrifice, but there's still nothing confirmed. So earlier this week there was a retailer leak and now a full-on confirmation that Metro Redux is coming to PS4 and Xbox One. Metro Redux is basically a remaster of Metro 2033 and Metro Last Light coming to next-gen systems. So it looks like what we talked about a few weeks ago in LTPS is more or less coming true. PS3 360 remasters coming to PS4 and Xbox One. You know, bumped up frames, bumped up visuals, a simple port, make some money. That's what these developers and publishers are all about, is making money. So why not do it? The release date for the game is July 2014. The developer said they want to, they need more time, but they'll be showing off more at E3. But more or less, this might be the new trend. So earlier this week, Sony sent out a little survey to PS4 users asking them what PS4 features they want most. Sony does this a lot. A lot of companies will send out surveys and tell you, hey, what do you want from us as a business? And then, it'll put a little thing saying like, least favorable, very favorable, blah, blah, blah. Standard survey stuff. Now, what's interesting is in the survey, they put a lot of very interesting features. They're more or less asking you, would you like to see a player reputation system based on like rating and, adding other players? A more advanced matchmaking system that says, we'll matchmake you with other players that have the same sort of reputation and skill as you. The ability to chat with PlayStation users across all platforms. So PS Vita, PS4, and PS3. And I would assume that means that just you could voice chat with PS3 users, because of course right now you cannot do that. Which I would also assume that means PS3 users still can't cross-game chat, but if you wanted to be in a chat room on PS3 with a PS4 user, you could do that. The oh-so-famous feature of being able to change your PlayStation Network ID. My God, I hope everyone that took the survey hit super, super favorable. The ability to go invisible so you can be online, but people won't know that you are online. The ability to party chat with over 8 players, which, I don't know, I probably wouldn't give a shit about that. The synchronization of all messages across all platforms, which, again, I have to assume everything here, but I would assume that means that, you read a message on PS3, it gets read on all systems. You read a message on Vita, it gets read on all systems, which right now it's kind of convoluted and really messed up in terms of where you read a message and where it gets understood that you read it. And basically the best way to manage your messages right now is on the PlayStation app on smartphone. And then on-screen notifications for when friends come on and offline on PS4, because PS4 actually doesn't have that if you haven't noticed. So very interesting stuff. Now I'm sure Sony has heard a bunch of people say they want these types of features, especially PSN name changes. I know that's a huge one, and Sony should be doing it because it's free goddamn money. If they even want to charge people to do it, like, why not do it? Sony has said multiple times, oh, it's not that easy to do it, but maybe if enough people say, like, this is a very appealing feature, then finally they'll prioritize that feature over the other. It's not like they're going to do 1 or 3 of these features out of the survey. They could possibly be delivering all of these to you, but just want to know which one they should prioritize over the other. A lot of people like to think, like, Sony doesn't listen, or Sony doesn't, they're going to give you this feature, but they're not going to give you that feature. You got to keep in mind, company, business, corporation, no matter what, they're always going to have every card on the table. They're always going to look at every card and see what they can do. As early as the PlayStation 2, I bet Sony has looked at all of these features, and, but it's one of those situations where it's back to the PS2, they didn't have the technology or resources to do these things. But companies will always experiment with the weirdest shit. So of course they're going to look at even standard features like these, right? You always got to understand that they have money and resources, and they only got to put them in certain areas. And that's not really like a defense on Sony's part, because that is how every business operates. It's just the fact that some businesses do it way better than others. Particularly with Sony. Sony really sucks at stuff like that. For example, Microsoft is really good at hearing feedback and delivering the feature very, very quick. Sony will do it too, but they just take forever, and then sometimes they just never actually deliver the feature, like PSN name changes, which we've been asking for upwards to 8 years. X1 right now is getting a bunch of updates, and Microsoft is delivering features to people as soon as they can, and in a very timely manner. Now, granted, they had problems to begin with, but it's like, you know, they hear people, they do it, right? It's great that Sony's listening, but they just take way too long. And I've even had rants about this before. Sometimes Sony will send out a firmware update, and it actually does worse. It causes your system to crash, or brick, or mess up. You gotta reload, boot your systems into safe mode. There's been years where the PS3's done this, the PSP's done this. There's been a couple issues with the PS Vita, even recently with like the 32 gigabyte memory card. It's, you know, Sony really freaking blows at that stuff. On a more positive note though, and like, you know, the original point is Sony wants to hear what you want. And we've said this how many times before: if you want a feature, if you want a game, if you want something, tell them, and they start listening, and then they'll respond to you more or less. One thing that really excites me though is that the PS4 is, you know, relatively new, but in the next 5, 6, 7 years, this system is going to have so many cool features, I can't even begin to think of what they are. You look at the PS3 in 2006 and you look at it now, and, you know, granted the XMB was relatively unchanged, but there is so many more features on the PS3 now. The PS3 launched with, oh my god, the PS3 sucked when it came out. You couldn't even download background download demos. If you wanted to download a demo on PS3, you had to sit there and watch 3 gigabytes download, and you couldn't do anything else on the system until the download finished. Which shows the drastic change of where PS3 is now. So the fact that the PS4, you've got more powerful hardware, you've got all this speed, system RAM, just the possibilities are endless, more or less, in a very cliche way for me to put it. So I am really excited in the next few years. Oh, and shout out to my typo last week on the Last of Us for PS4 banner, where I wrote Uncharted under it instead. Yeah, I do stuff like that. I make typos. Anyway, that concludes this week's episode of Let's Talk PlayStation. I'm Ryan Benecki. Thank you so much for talking with me, and I'll see you all next Friday.